Hey everyone, welcome to Quantum Mind Hub Stories. Before we dive into this intense and heartfelt story, I'd love to hear your own thoughts, perspectives, and lessons learned in the comments section below. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel, and share it with friends who love a good roller coaster of emotions. Alright, grab a comfy seat and let's get started. In the heart of a bustling African town where the red earth met the wide, endless sky, lived Adana, a quiet, unassuming girl whose silence resonated louder than any voice could. Born into a world that celebrated loud laughter and boisterous chatter, she was an anomaly, a gentle soul whose soft eyes held secrets of ages past. Adana's silence was not born of shyness alone, but of a deeply rooted conviction, a deliberate choice to observe rather than speak, to feel rather than shout. The villagers whispered about her, their words sharp as the thorny branches of the acacia trees that dotted the landscape. They said she was cursed, that her silence was a bad omen, and many laughed at her mysterious reserve. Yet, among the mocking and the jests, there was an unspoken respect, a silent acknowledgement that something extraordinary lay beneath that quiet exterior. Her every step was measured and deliberate, her presence serene amidst the chaotic symphony of everyday life. Even in the market squares and during long, dusty afternoons under the blazing sun, Adana moved like a shadow, ever watchful and unhurried, her silence an elegant protest against a world that prized noise over nuance. There was an ineffable quality to her stillness, as if she carried with her a weight of stories untold and secrets unshared. Every person who encountered her felt a subtle pull, a curious mixture of pity and admiration, as if her silence was a silent plea for understanding. A call to look beyond the surface and discover the depths hidden within. In a community where every life was intertwined with folklore and the wisdom of elders, Adana's quietude set her apart. People talked in hushed tones about the girl who never spoke, attributing her silence to mysterious forces or ancestral curses. The local women, with their wrinkled smiles and knowing eyes, speculated that her quiet nature was a deliberate shield against a harsh, judgmental society. Children would mimic her with playful exaggeration, yet even their innocent antics carried a tinge of reverence. Despite the constant teasing and the echo of laughter trailing behind her like a persistent shadow, Adana bore it with grace. She would often sit under the giant baobab tree on the outskirts of the village, watching the interplay of light and shadow, her thoughts weaving invisible threads between the present and the past. In these moments, the wind seemed to murmur secrets of old, secrets that only she could understand. The elders, who revered tradition and the wisdom of generations, believed that her silence was a reminder of the sacredness of unspoken truth, a truth that needed time and quiet to be fully understood. There was an old saying in the village that went, "The loudest thunder comes after the longest silence," and though many saw her silence as a mark of weakness, a few recognized it as the calm before an earth-shaking storm of revelation. The ambiguity of her nature, part mystery, part prophecy, left a lingering question in the hearts of those who observed her from afar. What secret power did she truly hold within? Among the many voices that filled the air in the village, one was especially harsh. Ngozi, the influential daughter of the village chief, who reveled in her own loudness and used it as a weapon against those she deemed different. Ngozi's cruelty knew no bounds. She made it her daily mission to belittle Adana, mocking her silence in public gatherings and at festive events. With her sharp tongue and commanding presence, Ngozi turned every encounter into an opportunity to humiliate the quiet girl. "Why do you hide behind your silence?" she would sneer, her words dripping with venom. "Is your quietness a sign of weakness, or is it because you fear the truth?" Each jeer was met with Adana's calm, unblinking gaze, a silent defiance that unnerved even the bravest souls. The other villagers, caught in the crossfire of tradition and the changing winds of modernity, often laughed along, their laughter mingling with the sound of cracking firewood on cold nights. Yet, amidst the jeering and the dismissive glances, a subtle undercurrent of sympathy flowed. There were those who saw beyond the surface, who recognized that Adana's silence was not an absence of voice, but a powerful presence waiting to burst forth like a hidden spring. The bitterness of Ngozi's words, intended to diminish, only served to amplify the enigma of Adana's quiet strength. Each cruel remark and every mocking smile from Ngozi and her clique was a reminder of the fragile balance between ridicule and respect. A balance that was about to be dramatically disturbed by the inexorable force of truth that lay dormant within the silent girl. As the season turned and the village buzzed with anticipation for the annual festival of stories, excitement and trepidation mingled in the air like the sweet and spicy aroma of freshly roasted corn. This festival was not just a celebration, it was a battleground of words, a contest of narratives where legends were born and reputations made. The village chief, a man whose authority was as formidable as the ancient baobab, promised a grand reward to the storyteller whose tale could move hearts and change destinies. It was a tradition steeped in history where every story told was believed to possess the power to heal, to challenge, and to transform. In the weeks leading up to the festival, the town square became a cauldron of activity. Artisans, dancers, and musicians filled the streets, each adding their own verse to the living epic of the community. Amidst this vibrant chaos, Adana remained a silent observer. Her presence, as understated as the first light of dawn, was a stark contrast to the clamorous enthusiasm around her. Yet, behind her calm demeanor, there simmered a secret, a legacy whispered by her late grandmother, a revered griot whose voice had once captivated kings and commoners alike. The tales of old, passed down in hushed tones through generations, hinted that Adana possessed a rare gift, a voice that could stir the soul and unravel the deepest of mysteries. The festival, with all its pomp and celebration, had unknowingly set the stage for a revelation that would shatter preconceptions and redraw the boundaries of respect and power in the village. As every eye turned to the preparations, the silent girl's destiny was quietly, inexorably weaving itself into the fabric of that storied night. In the quiet hours before the festival, the village seemed to pause in anticipation, each heart beating in sync with the rhythm of old legends and newfound dreams. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, mysterious shadows on the red earth, memories of a time long past began to stir in Adana's mind. She recalled the tender moments of her childhood spent at the feet of her beloved grandmother. A revered griot whose voice carried the weight of history and the magic of the spoken word. In a humble mud hut adorned with woven patterns and faded tapestries, her grandmother had shared the ancient art of storytelling with a reverence that bordered on the sacred. "My child," her grandmother had whispered, eyes sparkling with both wisdom and sorrow. "Our voices are not mere sounds. They are the vessels of truth. They can mend hearts or shatter empires, but they must be used with care and courage." Those words had etched themselves into Adana's very being, a delicate imprint of responsibility and destiny. Even as she grew older, the lessons of that cherished past echoed in the silent corridors of her mind, a quiet reminder that every unspoken word held the promise of transformation. Yet, the harsh realities of village life had led her to believe that speaking out was a risk too great, a risk that could unleash forces beyond her control. In the solitude of her inner world, however, the embers of that legacy burned steadily, waiting for the moment when the burdens of injustice and cruelty would demand to be cast into the open. And now, as the festival neared, the promise of a stage and an audience stirred a dormant courage within her, a courage that whispered of redemption, of secrets yearning to be told, and of a voice that could no longer remain silent. The day of the festival arrived with a fervor that electrified the air and set hearts racing with anticipation. The village square, usually a modest assembly point, had transformed into a grand arena where traditions met modern aspirations. Colorful banners fluttered in the wind, and the rhythmic beats of drums reverberated against the walls of ancient mud structures, calling everyone to witness the unfolding of a storied tradition. Amid the jubilant crowd and the contagious laughter of friends reunited after long separations, Adana's quiet presence was almost ethereal. Cloaked in simplicity, she moved through the gathering like a whisper, her face calm yet inscrutable. Unbeknownst to many, a subtle undercurrent of tension was about to emerge. As the festival progressed, the atmosphere shifted when the treasured amulet, a symbol of the village's collective history and prosperity, went missing. In a moment of panic, whispers turned to accusations. The eyes of the villagers, once filled with eager joy, now narrowed with suspicion and fear. It wasn't long before Ngozi, with her customary cruelty and a twisted sense of vindication, pointed an accusing finger at Adana. "This is your doing," she declared in a voice that carried both malice and authority. The crowd murmured in disapproval, their collective gaze heavy with expectation. In that charged moment, Adana's silence, once a source of gentle mystery, transformed into a formidable challenge. A challenge that demanded to be met with truth. The weight of blame, unjust and crushing, bore down upon her shoulders, setting the stage for a confrontation that would change the course of the festival, and perhaps the destiny of the entire village. In the wake of the accusation, the festive mood faltered, replaced by a pervasive gloom that swallowed the joy of the celebration. The once animated chatter was now punctuated by murmurs of doubt and suspicion, as the villagers struggled to reconcile their long-standing perceptions with the stark reality of the unfolding drama. The pressure mounted on Adana, whose silence had always been a protective shell, now turned into an unyielding prison. Her eyes, deep pools of unspoken emotion, darted around the gathering, silently pleading for understanding. It was then that an elder with a weathered face lined by countless stories of sorrow and triumph stepped forward. His voice, rough yet resonant with authority, broke through the heavy silence. "Sometimes the quietest voice carries the loudest truth," he proclaimed, his words echoing through the hushed crowd. His gentle admonition planted a seed of hope and defiance among those who had begun to question the injustice unfolding before them. Even as the villagers exchanged uncertain glances, that single utterance awakened something long dormant in Adana. The weight of false blame and humiliation pressed upon her like a storm cloud, yet it also ignited a spark of resolve, a determination to reclaim her dignity and reveal the hidden truths of the past. With trembling hands and a heart pounding like distant thunder, she stepped forward into the uncertain light, ready to break her silence. The old elder's words lingered in the air, a reminder that every story, no matter how softly told, possessed the power to reshape destinies and heal even the deepest wounds. As the tension reached a fever pitch, Adana found herself at the center of a swirling storm of doubt and expectation. The villagers who moments before had shared in a collective joy now watched in rapt silence, their eyes fixed on the girl who had become the reluctant bearer of truth. Her lips parted ever so slightly, as if hesitating at the threshold of a revelation that could either save or shatter her. "I will speak," she finally whispered, her voice emerging like a tentative breeze in the stillness of the night. Her declaration sent ripples through the crowd, halting the murmurs and forcing every ear to lean in. As she began, her tone was soft, almost fragile, yet each word carried an undeniable gravity, a gravity that seemed to pull the very soul of the village into a vortex of reflection. She recounted memories that had long been buried under layers of silence and fear. With each phrase, the darkness that had enveloped the room started to lift, replaced by a raw and unsettling clarity. Adana's narrative wove together threads of sorrow, injustice, and betrayal that the villagers had long ignored. She spoke of the wrongs inflicted not just upon her, but upon the community, painting a portrait of a society that was quick to judge and slow to listen. As her voice grew stronger, so too did the power of her words. They resonated with a timeless cadence, like the beat of a drum that summoned the spirits of ancestors, challenging everyone to face their own complicity in the tapestry of collective pain. In that charged moment, her voice was no longer a whisper. It was an undeniable force, laden with the weight of history and the promise of redemption. With every word that fell from Adana's lips, the atmosphere in the gathering shifted dramatically. What began as a murmur of disbelief soon transformed into an overwhelming wave of emotion. The villagers, who had once reveled in light-hearted mockery, now found themselves confronting the harsh truths that had been hidden beneath the surface of their everyday lives. Adana's narrative was a mirror reflecting their own fears, regrets, and unspoken transgressions. The room became a crucible of raw emotion. Some wept openly, tears glistening in the firelight as they recalled long-forgotten memories of pain and loss, while others stood frozen, their faces etched with a mix of remorse and reluctant understanding. Even Gozi, who had wielded her cruelty like a weapon, faltered in the face of the unyielding truth. Her eyes, once brimming with arrogance and disdain, now shimmered with unshed tears, as if the weight of her own misdeeds had finally caught up with her. The silence that followed Adana's revelation was not the absence of sound, but a heavy, charged stillness. A collective pause that allowed the truth to seep into the very soul of the gathering. In that moment, the village was forced to reckon with the undeniable power of one voice, a voice that had pierced the veil of ignorance and forced them to confront their own shortcomings. Adana's words had not just defended her innocence. They had dismantled a long-held facade of perfection and pride, revealing a community in desperate need of healing and transformation. As the echoes of Adana's revelations reverberated through the night, the village began to experience a profound metamorphosis. The truth, as unyielding as the rising sun, illuminated the hidden crevices of hearts long shrouded in guilt and denial. Conversations that had once been dominated by petty squabbles and idle gossip now turned to introspection and regret. The chief, a man who had long presided over the community with an iron fist tempered by tradition, found himself confronted by his own failings. With a heavy heart and a tremor of remorse in his voice, he admitted that the burdens of leadership had sometimes forced him to overlook the quiet suffering of those around him. In a rare moment of vulnerability, he acknowledged that the festival had become a stage for exposing not just individual faults, but the collective shortcomings of the community. The once jubilant celebration had transformed into a cathartic ritual of confession and reconciliation. Villagers approached one another with tentative gestures of apology, their eyes reflecting a newfound understanding that silence, though often mistaken for weakness, could also be the precursor to profound change. Adana, standing at the epicenter of this unfolding revolution of hearts, felt a quiet pride swell within her. Her long-suppressed voice had done more than clear her name, it had unlocked a torrent of introspection and renewal. In that charged space, where anger, sorrow, and hope mingled freely, the village began its slow journey toward healing. Each tear shed was a promise that truth, once spoken, could light the path to redemption and unity. The revelation stirred an undercurrent of change that rippled through every corner of the village. In the days that followed, the echoes of that fateful night continued to resonate deeply among the people. Conversations that were once guarded became open dialogues about the past and hopes for the future. Neighbors who had long harbored grudges found themselves drawn together, seeking to mend the invisible wounds inflicted by years of silence and misunderstanding. Even the children, whose playful laughter once masked the subtleties of the grown-up struggles, began to mimic stories of redemption and courage. In hushed voices, elders recounted the events of the festival as a turning point. A moment when a single, quiet voice had shattered the illusions of perfection and forced a community to confront its own truths. Adana, who had been a reluctant participant in this unfolding drama, was now revered as a beacon of hope. Her story had become a rallying cry for those who believed in the transformative power of truth. It was said that when the wind blew gently through the village, it carried whispers of her voice, gentle reminders that even the softest sounds could spark mighty change. The festival, once a celebration of storytelling, had evolved into a sacred space where justice was not only pursued but achieved through the power of honest expression. With every retelling of that transformative night, the community began to see that silence was not a barrier to change, but sometimes the very canvas upon which the most profound narratives were painted. In the quiet aftermath, as the village began to stitch together its fragmented identity, life slowly regained a rhythm that was both familiar and strikingly new. The air carried a sense of renewal, a subtle yet potent shift in the collective consciousness. People met in small clusters under the shade of mango trees and around communal fires, sharing their own stories of struggle and triumph. The once insurmountable chasm between the powerful and the powerless seemed to narrow, bridged by the shared understanding that every life carried its own weight of secrets and silent battles. In the local market, where voices had once clashed in a cacophony of competing interests, a newfound harmony emerged. Merchants, who had previously traded in both goods and gossip, now spoke in measured tones, each word laced with a respect born of shared humanity. Even the youngest members of the community, who had grown up with the image of Adana's quiet defiance, began to see that true strength lay not in loud proclamations but in the integrity of one's convictions. The story of that fateful festival had ignited a flame of introspection that burned away the dust of ignorance. Every whispered apology, every heartfelt confession was a step toward reclaiming the dignity that had been lost amid the mockery and the misdirected blame. Adana herself became a silent guardian of these truths, a living testament to the fact that the most powerful voices are often those that rise only when they are truly needed. Her journey, marked by hardship and heartbreak, had ultimately led her to a place of quiet triumph. A triumph that belonged not just to her, but to every soul who dared to seek justice through the unspoken language of the heart. As days turned into nights and the village slowly healed from the tumultuous events of the festival, a gentle but unmistakable change began to take root in the hearts of its inhabitants. The transformation was subtle at first, like the slow unfurling of a delicate flower after a long, harsh drought. Yet, over time, the change became impossible to ignore. Conversations that were once laden with judgment and disdain now held undertones of empathy and reflection. In the wake of Adana's courageous act of speaking, the community realized that silence, long seen as a mark of passivity, had concealed a profound strength. The once dismissed quiet girl was now the silent architect of change. Her legacy was woven into the fabric of everyday life. In the early mornings, As the sun cast golden hues over the sprawling fields, elders were heard sharing stories of her bravery and the lessons it imparted about the importance of listening to one another. The weight of past mistakes was slowly being lifted, replaced by a shared resolve to foster an environment where every voice could be heard, whether it came in thunderous roars or gentle whispers. Even Ngozi, whose previous cruelty had sown seeds of discord, was not untouched by the ripple of change. In private moments, she began to confront the harsh realities of her actions, grappling with a burgeoning sense of remorse and the daunting task of seeking forgiveness. The village, with its rich tapestry of traditions and cultural nuances, now found itself at a crossroads. One path led to the perpetuation of old wounds, while the other promised healing through understanding and unity. And so, the community slowly embraced the truth that true power was not measured in the volume of one's voice, but in the integrity and compassion that each person carried within. In the weeks that followed, as the first rains of the season began to wash away the dust of old grievances, the village took tentative steps toward reconciliation. The once distant echoes of laughter and scorn were gradually replaced by conversations that brimmed with hope and accountability. Community leaders, inspired by the transformative power of Adana's truth, organized small gatherings where villagers could share their burdens and heal together. Under starlit skies and around modest fires, old enemies became friends, united by a shared commitment to rebuild trust and create a more compassionate society. In one such gathering, an elderly woman, her voice trembling with both age and emotion, recounted how, in her youth, silence had often been mistaken for indifference. Now, she confessed, she understood that silence could also be a wellspring of untold courage, a silent reservoir that, when tapped, had the power to change lives. The gathering became a tapestry of personal narratives, each thread rich with pain, hope, and the promise of renewal. Adana listened quietly, her eyes reflecting both the burden of the past and the light of a future being forged in the crucible of shared understanding. Her transformation from a girl defined by her silence into a symbol of resolute truth was complete. The villagers, in their own way, began to take responsibility for the collective wounds that had festered for too long. With each story shared, with every tear shed and smile offered in tentative forgiveness, the community started to see that the path to healing was paved with honest communication and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. In the gentle hum of those heartfelt exchanges, the village discovered that every voice, no matter how softly it was spoken, held the power to bring about lasting change. As the days turned into a season of reflection and subtle renewal, whispers of change reached even the farthest corners of the village. The tale of Adana's powerful revelation had become a modern parable recounted in markets, homes, and gatherings as a reminder that truth and justice were worth the price of vulnerability. Neighbors who once eyed each other with suspicion now met with tentative smiles and nods of solidarity. The young and old alike began to see that the strength of a community lay in its ability to listen to the quiet truths that often went unheard. In the local school, teachers incorporated the lessons of the festival into their teachings, urging students to look beyond appearances and to appreciate the silent wisdom that each person carried within. Your voice, one teacher passionately explained, may be gentle, but it has the power to transform the world around you. These words resonated deeply with the children, who in turn brought a newfound empathy into their interactions. Even Ngozi, who had once wielded her voice as a weapon, was forced to reckon with the consequences of her actions. In private moments of introspection, she recognized that her cruelty had not only harmed others, but had also chained her own spirit to a legacy of bitterness. Slowly, the pride that had once defined her gave way to remorse, and in that transformation lay the seeds of true redemption. The village was no longer just a collection of individuals bound by tradition. It had become a living testament to the power of collective healing. And in the midst of it all, Adana's quiet strength shone as a beacon, guiding the community toward a future where every voice, however soft, could spark a revolution of compassion and understanding. In the wake of such profound change, the village found itself on the precipice of a new era, one defined by honesty, compassion, and the unyielding belief that every individual had a story worth telling. The transformation was not instantaneous, nor was it free of challenges. Old habits and deep-seated prejudices did not vanish overnight, and moments of tension still flared up like sudden thunderstorms over the savannah. Yet, the seeds of change had been planted, nurtured by the collective experience of witnessing the power of truth. Leaders began to organize regular gatherings where the community could deliberate on issues that had long been swept under the rug. During one such meeting, a young man, his eyes bright with newfound resolve, rose to speak about the importance of forgiveness and accountability. "We have seen," he declared, "that silence is not always an absence, it is sometimes the herald of a voice that will awaken our conscience." His words were met with nods of agreement and murmurs of approval, as if the entire village had come to recognize that every silent heart had the potential to burst forth with light. Adana, now a quiet pillar of strength, watched these changes with a bittersweet smile. She knew that her journey from the depths of silent despair to the heights of public catharsis had reshaped not only her destiny but the destiny of those around her. In her eyes, there was a spark of hope that the darkness of old wounds would give way to a future of shared empathy and understanding. And as the community embarked on this difficult yet promising path toward healing, the story of one quiet girl served as a timeless reminder that every voice, no matter how subdued, held the power to inspire a revolution of the heart. The months that followed were marked by a gradual but unmistakable renewal of the village's spirit. The transformative power of Adana's voice became a catalyst for deeper change, permeating the very core of the community. In everyday life, people began to look at one another with new eyes. Eyes that recognized the silent struggles behind every smile and the hidden strengths behind every quiet demeanor. Meetings at the community center, once formal and stifling, turned into open forums where grievances were aired and resolved through honest conversation. Traditional disputes that had simmered for generations were finally addressed, and slowly, the old wounds started to heal. The elders, who had long carried the weight of unspoken regrets, found solace in the fresh dialogue that bridged the gap between past and present. Their words, tinged with the wisdom of ages, resonated deeply with the younger generation, who were eager to learn from history's lessons without being burdened by its mistakes. In the midst of this transformation, the memory of that fateful festival remained a poignant reminder of the night when silence was shattered by the sound of truth. Adana, whose quiet determination had sparked this widespread change, walked through the village with a quiet dignity, her every step a symbol of resilience and hope. People would greet her with respectful nods and soft smiles, acknowledging her as the gentle force that had brought their community together. The legacy of her words was not just confined to the grand moments of public revelation. It seeped into everyday interactions, transforming how individuals related to one another. In this new era of empathy and accountability, the power of one voice had redefined the very essence of community life, proving that true transformation often begins in the quiet corners of the human heart. As the cycle of seasons turned and the village embraced the lessons of renewal, an undercurrent of introspection continued to grow. The landscape, marked by the legacy of ancient trees and sprawling fields, bore witness to a community in the midst of profound self-discovery. Stories of old were recounted with a new perspective, a perspective that honored the struggles of the past and celebrated the courage it took to face them. Under starlit nights, around modest fires, people shared anecdotes of personal triumphs and acknowledged the pain of lost opportunities. Each tale was a thread in the larger tapestry of the village's transformation. In this tapestry, Adana's once muted voice had become the golden thread that bound everything together. Her journey from a silent outcast to a catalyst for change had inspired countless individuals to reflect on their own lives. Even those who had once scoffed at her quiet demeanor now found themselves humbled, their hearts softened by the realization that every person's silence hid a story of struggle, resilience, and hope. Traditional healers and storytellers began to incorporate her tale into their teachings, emphasizing the importance of listening not just with one's ears but with one's heart. The echoes of that transformative night resonated in every corner of the village, urging each person to embrace both their strengths and vulnerabilities. And as the community moved forward, each step taken was a testament to the enduring power of truth, a truth that had been born from the quiet resolve of a girl who dared to speak when it mattered most. In the ensuing days, the village witnessed subtle yet unmistakable shifts in its social fabric. The air was lighter, the conversations richer, and the bonds between neighbors stronger than ever before. The once divisive lines drawn by prejudice and fear were slowly blurred by acts of kindness and mutual understanding. Marketplaces, once rife with sharp exchanges and whispered gossip, now hummed with genuine interactions and shared laughter. In these everyday moments, the legacy of that fateful festival was palpable. The community had learned that justice and reconciliation were not the results of loud declarations, but of small, persistent acts of courage, acts that required both vulnerability and empathy. As people gathered to celebrate even the simplest of joys, the memory of Adana's powerful words continued to inspire a collective shift in perspective. Leaders, once distant and detached, began to see themselves as part of the community, working together to rebuild trust and ensure that every voice was valued. The transformation was not without its challenges. Remnants of the old ways sometimes surfaced, threatening to disrupt the fragile harmony that had been so painstakingly achieved. Yet, in those moments, the community would pause and remember the truth that had been spoken, a truth that reminded them that every silence harbored the potential for revelation. And so, with each passing day, the village moved closer to a future where empathy and accountability reigned, a future built on the quiet yet unbreakable strength of the human spirit. In the final reckoning of a journey that had transformed both the girl and her entire village, the Festival of Stories came to symbolize more than just an annual competition. It had become a monument to truth, redemption, and the indomitable power of one voice. Under a vast, starlit sky that stretched above the Red Plains, the community gathered one last time to honor the spirit of change that had emerged from a single act of courage. Adana, standing at the center of the assembly, now radiated a quiet confidence that had once been misunderstood as mere silence. Her voice, tempered by the wisdom of her ancestors and the hardships of a lifetime of unspoken pain, had woven together a narrative of accountability, healing, and hope. With every word she spoke, the villagers were reminded of the preciousness of truth and the strength inherent in compassion. In that charged moment, the legacy of her grandmother, a revered griot whose words could sway hearts and alter destinies, was reborn through her. The audience, moved beyond measure, felt an overwhelming sense of unity as tears mingled with smiles and old resentments were finally laid to rest. In a stirring finale that transcended mere storytelling, the festival ended not with a victor in a contest, but with a profound awakening of the human spirit. As the night drew to a close, a resonant call to action filled the air. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, share with your friends, and comment below with your perspectives or the key lessons you have learned from our tale. This was more than a story. It was an invitation to join a community dedicated to truth, empathy, and the relentless pursuit of justice, where every silent heart has a voice that can change the world.